My childhood best friend was cornered in the classroom, getting beaten half to death by the school's resident mean girl. Just as I was about to step forward and stop it, lines of floating text suddenly materialized in the air, right in front of my eyes. Can the villainess just mind her own business? Doesn't she know this is just foreplay for a main couple? If it wasn't for this toxic third wheel interfering, the male and female lead would have gotten together ages ago. They wouldn't have missed out on all those years. It is fine. The male lead gets his revenge later, after enduring the humiliation of marrying the villainess, deliberately orchestrates multiple miscarriages for her, and gaslights her into severe depression. I bet the villainess does not even know that. When she finally suicide by jumping off a building, the male lead is in a hotel room having crazy, passionate hate sex with our sweet baby girl. I stared at the floating comments, turned on my heel, and walked away. These two toxic psychos deserved each other. They could and brought together. For all I cared, I stood at a distance watching Asher. Right now, he looked like a stray dog with a broken spine, slumped on the floor in utter humiliation. His faded school uniform was stained with dirt and blood, clinging to his trembling back. The girl bullying him, Blair, looked radiant and unattachable. She stood over him, grinding the sole of her designer shoe violently into Asher's long, slender fingers. Well, look at our genius scholar. You've got some tough bones, haven't you? Asher was pale as a ghost from the pain, but he clamped his jaw shut and refused to make a sound. If I had seen this exact scene 1 minute ago, my heart would have bled for him. But the floating text hovering in my vision was a blaring reminder to drop my savior complex and respect his destiny. So annoying. Why is Sydney showing up? To ruin the vibe again. The villainess is so stupid. Can she not see the sexual tension between our leads? If she hadn't reported Blair and gotten her expelled, the male lead wouldn't have lost so many years with his true love. Don't worry, guys. He gets payback for all of it later. This idiot Sydney definitely doesn't know that. The male lead is the one who swaps out her dad's heart medication. Serves the old man right for always looking down on our female lead. When the villain is finally jumps off the roof to end her miserable life, male lead is literally hooking up with our precious Blair in a penthouse suite. Ha ha ha. She deserves it. That is what you get for tearing true love apart. Every single word hovering in the air felt like a brutal, stinging slap across my face. So my self-righteous attempts to save him would only cost me, my family, and my life. I looked back at the classroom. I looked at the utter despair in Asher's eyes. He looked exactly like a beaten hound, waiting for its master to show it a shred of pity. A cold smile broke across my face. Since this was their twisted version of romance, and as the designated evil villainess, it would be incredibly rude of me to interrupt. My face completely blank, I pulled back the foot I had just stepped forward with, turned around and walked away without a second thought. I barely made it 30 feet down the hall before a sickening, brittle crunch echoed from the classroom. Immediately after Asher let out a blood-curdling scream, the floating comments instantly dissolved into mass panic. Oh no, because the villainess didn't interfere. The female lead actually broke his right hand. This is insane. It is a comminuted fracture. He is completely ruined. How is the male lead supposed to take the state placement exams now? Sydney, you are so evil. Why didn't you turn around? If you just stopped her, the female lead would have backed off. I scoffed under my breath. How is that my problem? Half an hour later, Asher stumbled into my line of sight. Face was twisted in agony, and his uniform was covered in dusty footprints. But the worst part was his right hand, which was currently bent at a completely unnatural angle. I slapped a look of pure exaggerated shock onto my face. Oh my God. Asher, your hand. I reached out, pressed my thumb directly against his fractured bone, and pushed down hard. Ah. Asher's shriek echoed through the entire corridor. He violently shoved me away, cradling his mangled hand against his chest. He screamed at me, Sydney, are you insane? Are you trying to kill me? Oh, so that hurt. I pretended to lose my balance and grabbed his arm to steady myself, suddenly driving my elbow straight into his eye socket. Asher shrieked even louder. The floating comments were weeping for him. Is the villainous brain dead? Can she not see our male lead is severely injured? What a stupid bitch. She deserves to have her family destroyed. Later on, I sneered internally, pulling my phone out of my pocket. This is going way too far. I am calling the cops. No, you absolutely cannot call the cops. Fighting through the blinding pain, Asher lunged forward and snatched my phone out of my hand. Sydney, what is wrong with you? Are you trying to ruin Blair's entire life? I raised an eyebrow, genuinely astounded by the absolute absurdity coming out of his mouth. She literally shattered your hand. And you are standing here blaming me for wanting to report her? Asher's eyes burned with a delusional, desperate need to protect her. You don't understand anything. Sure, she has a bit of a temper, but deep down she is a kind girl. She only acts out because she comes from a broken home and needs an outlet to vent. She is fragile and pitiful on the inside. She just needs someone to be patient with her. But you, Sydney, I never realized how cold-blooded and selfish you really are. I slowly clapped my hands together.
Beautifully said.
Well, Asher, since you think I am so incredibly selfish, starting tomorrow you can begin paying back all the sponsorship money my family has given you over the years. Asher's parents died in a car crash when he was young. I was the one who begged my wealthy parents to sponsor his education and living expenses. I never expected to be feeding a rabid dog that would eventually turn around and bite my entire family to death. Hearing my demand, Asher looked as if I had just spit in his face. Sydney, do you honestly think I care about your money? Your family forced that charity on me.
Great.
Then pay it back. By the end of the argument, Asher was forced to awkwardly use his left hand to scribble out a formal promissory note for his debts. I snatched the paper and flicked it with my fingernail. From this day forward, our only relationship is creditor and debtor. The comments completely lost their minds. Is she crazy using money to humiliate the male lead? Does she think having some cash makes her a god? $10,000, please. The male lead will make that in a heartbeat later in the story. I get it. The villainess is using debt to trap him. She thinks tying him down with money will get his attention. Keep dreaming, you psycho. I had to admit that last comment actually made me feel nauseous. Asher and I parted on terrible terms. I thought I could finally just focus on my studies. The very next day, Blair cornered me by the bathrooms. Blair blinked her big watery eyes at me, a vicious smile playing on her lips. Sydney, want to guess what I did to your precious boy next door today? Why don't you beg me? If you get on your knees and beg, I promise I won't lay another finger on him. How about it? The comments flooded my vision. Haha, our girl is so dark and twisted. I love it. Our sweet angel did nothing wrong. She just wants to force the villainess to submit. To be fair, this is all Sydney's fault anyway. Yes, Blair. Teach her a lesson. Sydney totally humiliated the male lead yesterday and made him write an IOU. While the comments debated exactly how I was going to tearfully drop to my knees and surrender, I raised my arm without a single warning sign and slapped Blair across the face. Mac, the entire world went dead silent. Blair cupped her cheek, her eyes wide with absolute disbelief. Sydney, did you just hit me? I raised my hand and slapped her again. I hit you because I felt like hitting you. Did I need to check my calendar first? Blair let out a furious shriek and lunged at me, raising her hands to fight back. I was entirely prepared. I grabbed her by the shoulders and slammed her hard against the tiled wall. She started screaming and kicking. I grabbed a fistful of her hair and yanked her head back, forcing her to look up at the ceiling. Scream.
Come on.
Scream louder. Let's get the teachers in here so they can see exactly who the school bully is. Besides, I gently patted her red, swollen cheek. Besides, if the teachers do show up, who do you think they're going to believe? You or the straight of valedictorian? Blair was shaking uncontrollably from pure rage.
Sydney, you bitch.
You just wait. I am going to make your little boyfriend's life a living hell. Hearing that, I intentionally paused my movements. I let a flash of fake panic cross my face. Don't you dare. If you keep bullying Asher, I swear I will never forgive you. After delivering my completely hollow, pathetic warning, I released her and stumbled away down the hall, making my footsteps sound frantic and chaotic. Behind me, Blair slumped against the wall, gasping for air. Just as I turned the corner, I caught a glimpse of her eyes. They were shining with a sick, excited excitement. She looked like a predator that had just found a massive, weak spot in its prey. I prayed silently in my heart, please don't let me down. The female lead truly lived up to her title. Her efficiency was terrifying. In just a few days, Asher lost a massive amount of weight, even though I didn't witness the abuse with my own eyes. The floating comments gave me a play-by-play update on his misery. The male lead got locked in a bathroom stall and drenched in toilet water. He is shivering so hard right now. Blair just pushed him down a flight of stairs. He totally twisted his ankle, summoned poured water all over his desk, and shredded his textbooks into the trash can. This is entirely Sydney's fault. If she hadn't provoked the female lead, Blair wouldn't be taking her anger out on him. The villainess is so evil. If she hadn't cut off his allowance, he would have had enough money to go to the hospital. and get his hand treated right. Totally my fault. I was the ultimate scapegoat. Everything that went wrong in the universe was clearly on my shoulders. These commentators genuinely seemed to lack basic brain development. I was busy rolling my eyes at the time. Next, when I turned a corner and saw Asher pinned to the ground, Blair was wearing heavy leather loafers, grinding her heel ruthlessly into his mangled, untreated right hand. She uncapped a bottle of water and dumped it directly over his head. Come on, genius. Didn't you say you were going to save me? Speak up. Asher had dark, bruised bags under his eyes. His lips were a bloodless white, but his cheeks burned with an unnatural feverish red. The exposed skin on his arms was littered with fresh scrapes and cuts. His eyes were totally unfocused. He kept muttering the same thing over and over. Save me. I turned around and walked away. Respect their destiny. Drop the savior complex, Asher. Didn't you want to be bullied by her? Then enjoy every single second of it. 3 days later, Asher collapsed in the middle of gym class and was rushed to the emergency room because he delayed treatment for far too long. The bone in his right hand was severely infected. Crozes had set in. To stop the infection from spreading and killing him, the doctors had no choice but to amputate his hand. I learned all of this from the frantic floating comments. That very afternoon, I packed a bag and headed straight to the hospital to visit him. After all, as the designated evil villainess, how could I pass up a golden opportunity to rub salt in his wounds? The sterile stench of bleach and iodine hit me the moment I pushed open the door. To room 402. Asher sat propped up against a mountain of white pillows. His right arm, wrapped in thick layers of gauze, ended abruptly just below the elbow, a blunt, truncated stump where a brilliant scholar's writing hand used to be. His face was hollowed out, dark rings carved deep into his pale skin, looking less like a high school prodigy and more like a ghost that had forgotten how to pass on. Above his head, the space hummed with neon, floating text. The commentary was firing off in a hysterical frenzy. System error. Male lead main hand amputated. Plot derailment. 92%. Where is the black-bellied tech mogul storyline now? How is he supposed to write code and sign multi-billion-dollar contracts with one hand? Sydney, you absolute monster. You ruined his life. If you had just stepped in and let Blair vent her trauma, none of this would have happened. Don't worry, guys. True love overcomes everything. Blair will see his sacrifice and fall deeply in love with him now. I nearly laughed out loud. The sheer, unadulterated delusion of these unseen spectators was almost hypnotic. Are you here to gloat? Asher's voice was raspy, dry as dead leaves. He didn't look up from his bandaged arm. Did you come to see what your cold-hearted selfishness did to me? I adjusted the lapels of my tailored beige trench coat, casually setting a basket of sour, unpeeled green apples on his bedside table. Gloat? Asher, how could you say that? I put on a tone of mild, patronizing sympathy. I brought you fruit, though considering your condition, I suppose you'll need someone to peel them for you now. What a shame. Asher's head snapped toward me, his eyes bloodshot and burning with pure rage. You bitch. You knew Blair was unstable. You hit her. You provoked her, and then you ran away. She took all her rage out on me because of you. Is that how your twisted little brain worked it out? I stepped closer, resting my hands on the metal footboard of his bed. Let me refresh your memory, Asher. Blair crushed your hand. You snatched my phone to stop me from calling the police. You told me she was a fragile, pitiful girl who just needed patience. You begged me not to ruin her life. I tilted my head, smiling faintly. You begged for this beating. You cherished it as your weird, pathetic form of foreplay. I simply respected your choice.
Why?
Aren't you thanking me? You cut off my allowance, he roared, his voice cracking. If I had money, I could have gone to a private clinic that same afternoon. I wouldn't have caught an infection. My bone wouldn't have rotted. Money. I pulled a crisp manila folder from my leather tote bag and tossed it onto his lap. You mean my family's money? The money you claimed you never cared about? The charity you said we forced on you? Asher froze. His left hand trembled as he flipped open the folder. Inside was an itemized ledger spanning 6 years. Private school tuition, $48,000. Specialized academic tutoring, $18,000. Housing and utilities stipend, $36,000. Designer wardrobe, laptop, and daily living allowances, $26,450. Total outstanding debt, $128,450. Attached to the bottom was the IOU he had scribbled out with his left hand 2 days ago, bearing his fresh legal signature. As of 8 o'clock this morning, I said calmly, my family's legal team has filed a formal petition with the court to freeze your sponsored bank accounts and place a lien on your personal belongings until this debt is settled in full. Since you are now 18 and legally an adult, all living stipends have been terminated. Asher's breath hitched. You can't do this. I have no family. I have no hand. How am I supposed to pay this back? That sounds like a personal problem, I replied smoothly. You have such a high opinion of yourself, don't you? A genius scholar. I'm sure a mastermind like you will figure out a way to make 100 grand with one hand. The floating comments were spitting fire. Is she crazy? Pushing the male lead to a corner like this. She's pushing him right into Blair's arms. Once Blair finds out how miserable he is, her maternal instincts will kick in. Just wait, Sydney. When Blair's rich family adopts Asher, you'll be crying on your knees. Right on cue, the heavy wooden door of the private room swung open. Blair stood on the threshold. She was dressed in a silk blouse and a pleated tartan skirt, looking immaculate, pristine, and entirely unbothered. Behind her stood 2 beefy bodyguards provided by her family's security firm. When her eyes landed on Asher's amputated arm, a fleeting shadow of discomfort crossed her face, quickly replaced by a smug, predatory smirk. Well, Blair purred, strolling into the room. Look at the little invalid. Sydney, are you here trying to buy back your dog's loyalty? Asher's eyes lit up with a pathetic, desperate spark. Blair, you came. He actually thought she came out of love. He thought she came to save him. I took a step back, gesturing grandly to the hospital bed like a salesperson, offering a clearance item. He's all yours, Blair, I said, my voice dripping with sweet indifference. I've officially severed all financial ties with him. He doesn't owe me a single favor, and I don't owe him a single tear. Feel free to break his left hand. 2. If the mood strikes, I won't be standing in your way. Blair's smirk faltered slightly. She blinked, thrown off by my absolute lack of jealousy or defiance. The entire draw of picking on Asher had been to watch me squirm, to watch the righteous valedictorian break her posture to save her childhood friend.
But now,
I was looking at Asher like he was a smear of grease on the bottom of my shoe. Without me acting as the desperate protector, the game suddenly lost all its flavor. You're not going to stop me? Blair asked, her brow furrowing. Stop you? I laughed, a sharp, melodic sound that rang through the sterile
room.
Why would I stop true love? You two are made for each other. A sadist and a masochist. It's practically poetry. I leaned down to Asher's ear, whispering loudly enough for Blair to hear every single word. Good luck with your new master, Asher. Try not to bleed on her shoes next time. I hear leather is expensive to clean. With that, I turned on my heel and walked out of the room, my heels clicking, sharp and rhythmic against the polished floorboards. Behind me, the bullet comments were spinning out of control. Wait. Why is Sydney leaving? Isn't there supposed to be a tearful confrontation where Sydney tries to snatch him back? Look at Blair's face. She looks disgusted. Plot error. Plot error. Male lead is being abandoned. I pulled out a small wet wipe, carefully wiping down the fingers that had touched Asher's bed frame, and tossed it into the nearest hazmat bin. Respecting their destiny felt fantastic. Without my intervention to spark her competitive malice, Blair's interest in Asher rotted faster than fruit in the summer sun. Within 3 weeks of his discharge from the hospital, Asher was forced to pack up his belongings from his bright, sunlit apartment, which my father had paid the lease on, and move into a damp, windowless basement room on the outskirts of the industrial district. He couldn't afford a private tutor anymore. He could barely dress himself with one hand. His right sleeve was pinned up with a rusted safety pin, and his once immaculate uniform was dirty, yellowing, and smelled faintly of mold. He tried to go back to school to prepare for the National University Placement exams, but the school board, terrified of public backlash after the news of an amputee student broke, quietly suggested he take a leave of absence. In reality, it was Blair's father who had pulled the strings behind the scenes. The wealthy family didn't want a mutilated, impoverished boy walking around campus reminding everyone of the incident that almost got their precious daughter suspended. I watched it all unfold from the comfort of the student council office. As the valedictorian and student body president, I had access to every record, Every camera feed, and every piece of campus gossip. One rainy Thursday afternoon, I stood on the second-floor balcony sipping black.
There.
Below, near the iron gates of the school, Asher was waiting in the pouring.
Then,
He had no umbrella. He held a soggy, handwritten letter in his left hand, his teeth chattering uncontrollably from the cold. When Blair's luxury sedan pulled up to the gate, Asher threw himself forward, slamming his left palm against the tinted passenger window. Blair, Blair, please, he sobbed, his voice raw. I dropped the charges.
my
Landlady is kicking me out tomorrow. Just let me stay in your guest
house.
I'll do anything. I'll be your servant. The window rolled down 3 inches. Blair sat inside, wrapped in a plush cashmere coat, looking at him with utter revulsion. Get your filthy hand off my car, you freak, she said, her voice carrying across the quiet courtyard. You're getting grease on the glass. Blair, you said I was special. Asher cried, tears mixing with the rain streaming down his hollow cheeks. You said you only hit me because you
Cared.
You said you needed an outlet. Blair burst into cruel laughter. Special? You were only interesting because Sydney kept running after you like a stressed-out mother hen. Watching her beg was funny.
But now,
You're just a pathetic, one-handed cripple who smells like garbage. Get away from me. She signaled her driver. The black car accelerated smoothly, its rear tire splashing a wave of muddy gutter water straight over Asher's face and chest. Asher collapsed onto the asphalt, clutching his damp letter, shivering like a
Drownrad.
The floating text hovered above the muddy scene, frantic and fragmented. What is happening? Why is Blair being so mean to him? Where is the enemies to lovers arc? Where is the underground dark romance? He sacrificed his hand for her. Why isn't she kissing his wounds? This isn't dark romance. This is just domestic violence and abandonment. Sydney. Where is Sydney? Sydney needs to save him so Blair can get jealous again. I took another calm sip of my tea, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. Save him? I chuckled softly under my breath. Why would I ruin such a masterpiece of natural consequences? Asher had traded his family's honor, my family's money, his own bright future, and his physical health for the chance to play the tragic hero in Blair's sick
Game.
Now that the play was over, he was realizing that the stage lights were off. The audience had walked out, and he was left standing in the dark alone. I turned away from the balcony, pulling out my phone to check my schedule. My father's annual corporate gala was in 3 weeks. In the original timeline, that gala was where Asher, acting as my fiancé, was introduced to our board of directors, gaining access to the confidential medical files he would later use to swap my father's heart medication.
Not this time.
I opened my email and drafted a message to our head of security and HR. Subject: Security protocols and personnel blacklist. Please ensure that Asher Vance is permanently barred from all company premises, subsidiaries, and private family residences. Revoke all visitor passes previously issued in his name. Terminate his summer internship contract immediately. I hit send. The timeline was shifting. The script was breaking. And I was holding the sledgehammer. For the next month, the floating text grew dimmer day by day. Without the dramatic tension of a high society love triangle, the invisible readers were abandoning the narrative. The comments, which used to fill my field of vision like a neon blizzard, were reduced to a trickling stream of confused, bitter remarks. Is this novel dropped? The ML is literally working night shifts out of convenience.
Store with one hand.
He got fired yesterday for dropping a crate of glass bottles. He can't even pay rent. The FL is dating some rich college athlete now. She doesn't even remember Asher exists. This is the worst romance novel I've ever read. The villainess is living her best life and the leads are completely destroyed. I paid little attention to their whining. My focus was entirely on securing my family's empire. My father, Richard, was a brilliant man, but he was overly trusting. He had treated Asher like a son out of pity for his dead parents.
If I wanted to
prevent my father's tragic death, I needed to purge every potential vulnerability in our household. I replaced our private family physician with a renowned medical team from
abroad.
I swapped our butler and executive secretary for vetted professionals with no ties to Asher's past. I had full-spectrum surveillance installed in my father's study, his bedroom, and the private pharmacy where his daily medications were stored. Everything was airtight, or so I thought. Desperation makes a rat dangerous. On the eve of the corporate gala, I was working late in my father's home study, reviewing the Q3 financial reports. The house was quiet, save for the rhythmic patter of rain against the floor-to-ceiling glass windows. A sudden, sharp ping echoed from my laptop screen. It was an automated alert from the smart security system I had installed in the estate's private garden. Camera 4. Motion detected near the West Conservatory. I zoomed in on the feed. A figure clad in a dark hoodie was scrambling over the brick wall. The intruder moved with an awkward, lopsided gait, holding himself awkwardly because his right sleeve was empty and tucked tightly into his belt.
Asher.
My eyes narrowed. He hadn't given up. In the original script, Asher had used a key card I gave him to enter the house. Quietly. Tonight, he was breaking in like a common thief. I watched through the night vision camera as he pulled a small set of lockpicking tools from his pocket with his left hand. It took him 10 excruciating minutes of trembling, clumsy effort to pop the latch on the side door of the study wing. He didn't know I was sitting right inside the adjacent office, watching him on high-definition video feeds. He slipped through the door, wet sneakers squeaking faintly on the marble tile. He was breathing heavily, his face flushed with a sickly, feverish red.
His eyes
Were wide, manic, and completely unhinged. He crept toward my father's desk, reaching into his pocket to pull out a small glass pill bottle filled with plain white capsules, an exact replica of my father's custom blood pressure medication. So, I thought, a cold wave of disgust washing over me. The script tries to correct itself. Even without marrying me, even without being sponsored by my family, his instinct was still to destroy us. He blamed my father for revoking his scholarship. He blamed me for revoking his future. In his broken, narcissistic mind, if he couldn't have the grand life he was destined for, he would tear down the people who refused to play his audience. He reached for the official pill bottle resting on the mahogany desk.
click.
The overhead chandeliers flared to life, flooding the study with blinding, warm
Light.
Asher shrieked, jumping back and dropping the fake pill bottle.
It shattered.
Against the hardwood floor, rolling white pills scattering in every direction. I stood by the light switch, folding my arms over my chest. Two muscular, suit-clad security guards stepped out from the shadows behind me, their hands resting on their holstered tasers. "Late night for a house call, Asher," I said softly. Asher scrambled backward until his spine hit the bookshelf. He looked at me with a terrifying mixture of hatred and terror. "Sydney," he spat out, his voice shaking. You trapped me." "I didn't trap you. You walked into a lit room with a pocket full of poison," I corrected, walking over to pick up one of the scattered pills with a gloved hand. "Attempted murder by substitution of prescription medication.
Corporate. Burglary.
Breaking and entering." I held up my phone, which was currently recording everything in 4K resolution. The screen also showed a live-streamed feed of the entire encounter, backed up directly to our legal firm's cloud server. "You really are remarkably consistent," I sighed.
You always pick the path that
"Ruins you fastest." "It's your fault," Asher screamed, his chest heaving as he pointed his trembling left finger at me. "It's all your fault. If you hadn't stopped paying for my school, I would have passed the exams. If you hadn't slapped Blair, she wouldn't have broken my hand. You took everything from me.
you owed me.
Your family owed me. We owed you." I stepped closer, looking down at him with genuine amazement.
My
"Family gave you a home, an education, food, and clothes for 6 years. We gave you hundreds of thousands of dollars. And what did you give us? Betrayal, entitlement, resentment." I leaned in, my voice dropping to an icy whisper. "You thought you were the protagonist of the world, Asher. You thought everyone was supposed to suffer so you could have your tragic, beautiful redemption arc. But you're not a hero. You're just a parasite that ran out of blood to drink." I turned to the security guards. "Call the police. Hand over the 4K footage, the lockpicking set, and the tampered pills for chemical analysis."
No.
"No. Sydney, wait." Asher threw himself onto his knees, crawling toward me, his single hand grabbing frantically at the hem of my pants. "Sydney, please.
We
Grew up together.
remember when we were 10?
Remember the park? You said you'd always protect me." I didn't step back. I simply looked down at his tear-streaked, pathetic face, feeling absolutely nothing.
No anger.
No sadness. Just pure, sterile relief. "I remember," I said quietly. "And that 10-year-old girl died the moment you decided my family was disposable." I kicked his hand away from my hem. The security guards grabbed him by his arms, hauling him up off the floor as he screamed and thrashed like a lunatic. Above his head, the floating text made one final, violent flicker. Critical system failure. Male lead arrested for attempted murder. Narrative. Collapse imminent. Story terminated. With a faint static pop, the floating words shattered into shimmering digital dust and vanished into thin air. The vision was gone. The audience was gone.
There was only reality left.
And in reality, actions had consequences. I wasn't done. Asher was behind bars awaiting trial, but the second half of the toxic equation, Blair, was still walking free, protected by her family's massive fortune and political influence. Her father, Marcus Vance, no relation to Asher, was the CEO of Vanguard Media Group, a powerful conglomerate that owned several major news outlets and entertainment platforms. It was this media empire that had shielded Blair from every bullying scandal she had caused in the past. If I wanted to ensure my family's absolute safety, I had to cut Vanguard off at the roots. The opportunity came 3 weeks later. Through our family's investment firm, I spent millions quietly purchasing short positions on Vanguard Media stock. Simultaneously, I compiled a massive,
Ironclad dossier.
it contained
1.
high-definition security footage of Blair breaking Asher's hand in the classroom. 2. Hospital records documenting the infection, necrosis, and subsequent amputation. 3. Audio recordings of Blair threatening other students, extorting teachers, and using her father's influence to erase her academic infractions. 4. Financial records proving that Vanguard Media had laundered hush money, payments to victimized families through fake charity subsidiaries. I didn't release it to the local press. Vanguard controlled them. Instead, I sold the entire package directly to an international financial crime syndicate and independent investigative journalism outlets overseas. The blast hit the markets on a Monday morning. By 9 a.m., the video of Blair grinding her heel into Asher's hand went viral across global social media platforms, garnering 50 million views in under 3 hours. The sheer cruelty of the video, combined with the tragic image of the boy's amputated hand, sparked absolute public outrage. By 11 a.m., federal investigators raided Vanguard Media's corporate headquarters, executing search warrants for tax evasion, corporate fraud, and obstruction of justice. By 2 p.m., Vanguard stock had plummeted by 74%, wiping out billions of dollars in market cap in a single trading session. I sat in my father's high-floor corporate office, sipping champagne as I watched the live news broadcast on the wall-mounted television. The screen showed Blair and her father being led out of their private estate in handcuffs by federal agents. Blair was screaming, her pristine blonde hair tangled, her face smeared with running makeup as reporters shoved microphones into her face. She looked completely wild, terrified, and utterly broken, a far cry from the radiant, untouchable mean girl who had crushed fingers under her designer shoes. My father walked into the office, carrying 2 glasses of sparkling water.
He
Looked at the TV screen, then at me, a proud, quiet smile playing on his lips. "The board just voted Sydney," he said softly. "You've been officially appointed as the incoming chief executive officer upon your graduation next
spring."
I turned to him, raising my champagne flute. "Thank you, Dad." "You did all of this, didn't you?" he asked, his eyes sharp with an old businessman's intuition. "You destroyed Vanguard. You caught Asher. You saved our family." "I just removed the trash, Dad," I replied smoothly, clinking my glass against
His.
It was long overdue. 2 years later, the summer sun shone brightly over the grand auditorium of State University. I stood at the podium, clad in my black velvet graduation gown and valedictorian
Sash.
Below me sat thousands of students, faculty members, and proud parents, their applause echoing through the cavernous hall. My father sat in the front row, looking healthy, vibrant, and smiling broadly. "Life," I said into the microphone, my voice clear and steady, echoing through the speakers, "is not a script written by someone else. It is not governed by destined tropes, tragic sacrifices, or toxic excuses disguised as passion." I looked out over the crowd, enjoying the crisp, clear air. There were no neon floating comments, no invisible readers demanding I sacrifice my life for someone else's sick romance. We are defined entirely by the choices we make when no one is watching, I
continued.
And the strength to walk away from what destroys us is the greatest power we possess. The applause erupted, loud and deafening. After the ceremony, I walked out into the campus quadrangle. My assistant handed me a tablet displaying the morning's legal updates. I glanced at the news briefs. Case update: Asher Vance's final appeal for early parole denied. Serving 8-year sentence for attempted murder and corporate burglary. Case update: Blair Vance sentenced to 12 years in federal penitentiary for felony assault, bribery, and tax fraud. Vanguard Media liquidates remaining assets. I closed the file with a swipe of my thumb. Asher was rotting in a cell, learning what happens when a parasite loses its host. Blair was stripped of her wealth and status, learning that the world did not belong to her. And me? I stepped into the back seat of my black limousine. My driver closed the door smoothly, shutting out the noise of the world. "Where to, CEO Sydney?" he asked respectfully. I looked out the window at the clear, blue, unwritten sky. "To the office," I said, smiling. "We have a world to run."